You know what I think you, hero? I think you're a half measure. I think you're a man who can't finish the job. I think that you're a coward. You know the one thing that you just can't see? You know you're one bad day away from being me.
So, I'm going through some massive Daredevil withdrawals. It's been 2.5 years since I've seen my boy on screen beating the living heck out of people, and I need my fix, man. But what really inspired me to make this video is that there's a lot of superhero shows coming out right now. We got WandaVision, Invincible, The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, The Flash Season 7, and a few more. But only a handful of these shows have really interesting antagonists. I'm not going to go into each one, but I will be making some comparisons to other villains that didn't work for me. Oops, sorry, I didn't mean to show that. Excuse me. So in today's video essay, we're going to go into what makes a good antagonist. And we're going to be using Daredevil as the frame of reference because, well, I love the show. Do I talk about it too much on this channel? Probably. Is that a bad thing? Probably. Will I ever stop? Absolutely not. But before I get started, I just want to say if you enjoyed the video, please remember to leave a like and subscribe. Alright, let's get into it. So what makes a good antagonist? To me, a good antagonist should fundamentally challenge the protagonist on a very personal level. This could be philosophically challenging them, physically challenging them, making them see different perspectives, and overall just make things interesting for our main hero to overcome. And not only that, they have to be layered. There's nothing less interesting than an antagonist who gets in the way of the protagonist but has no personality to them. For example, let's use Agatha from WandaVision. She's a pretty big physical challenge to Wanda as she's a really experienced magic user, but do we really care? Well, I didn't. Agatha has a pretty cookie-cutter motivation, this being to just get more power, and we virtually know nothing about her as a person. This is important because it adds stakes to the story. If someone is simply overpowering another person and that's all there is to it, it's pretty uninteresting. So let's start off with our boy Wilson Fisk. Wilson Fisk is hands down one of the worst villains I've ever seen on screen. He is really just a big dumb brute that beats people up and has no complex motivations to him and... Wait, what? You're saying we learn about his traumatic past that delves deep into his childhood and that he's secretly just a scared little kid afraid of losing the people he loves, which is contrasted with his mother, Hell's Kitchen, and Vanessa? And he's also extremely intellectual, physically powerful, and shows how easily corruptible our society is as long as there's money involved? Huh, wow. But yeah, hopefully I didn't just get a million dislikes even joking about that, because Vincent D'Onofrio's Wilson Fisk is actually one of my favorite villains of all time. And no, I am not being hyperbolic. And real quick, there is a reason why I chose Daredevil, and that's because it's a show. I realize that some movies, they're just not able to flesh out their villains as much as a TV show could. And Daredevil is a TV show that really takes its time delving into its villains. We don't even get our first glimpse at Fisk until the end of episode 3, and even then, he's still not in season 1 all that much. But even when he's not on screen, his presence is really heavy. Before this guy's even shown on screen, we're already terrified of him due to how everyone speaks about him. The people that he works with are so afraid of him that they don't even want to say his name and would rather die than to face him. We also see the police are under his whim, which visually shows to us how much money, power, and influence he has without any exposition or screen time with Fisk. It's just amazing. The name Kingpin will come to mind without even knowing that's his comic book name. Now, he's a really great villain, but it is easy to mess something like this up. Let's do a quick comparison to another Kingpin on a TV show called Arrow. In Arrow Season 6, we're introduced to one of our big baddies by the name Ricardo Diaz. They try doing this thing where he's corrupted the entire police force and that he's garnered all this control, but there's really no build up to it, nor is there a reason for it. Daredevil has Kingpin corrupting the police force because Daredevil's entire philosophy as a person is justice, both as a lawyer and as a vigilante. And what do you do if the justice system that you're trying to serve is completely corrupt? And is Daredevil already a hypocrite as he's trying to bring justice outside of the law? Which also begs another question, are these two individuals all that different? I mean, they're both just ordinary people trying to make Hell's Kitchen a better place by operating outside of the law. There's just so many functions for just this one plotline in Daredevil, but in Arrow, there's no stakes surrounding it. We don't see people killing themselves rather than giving up Diaz, and we also see his face too much. In Daredevil, we get Fisk in bite-sized pieces, but slowly unravel him at the end of the season where he gets more and more screen time. So Diaz is basically just a two-dimensional version of Wilson Fisk, as he has all the power of Fisk, but there's no complexity, intrigue, theme, or reason to care. Now let's move on to the Punisher. A lot of people give flack to Daredevil Season 2, and I completely get that. But the first 4 episodes of Season 2 are absolutely masterful. Like, seriously, it does not get talked about as much as it should. And a big reason as to why it works as well as it does is Jon Bernthal's portrayal of Frank Castle, aka Punisher. The writers do a very similar yet very different approach with introducing Punisher and Wilson Fisk. Punisher's first action is an off-screen sequence where he absolutely massacres an Irish mob single-handedly. So we already have stakes, tone, a sense of morality, and mystery since we don't see his face. The show also builds it up masterfully as we have a lone survivor constantly referring to Punisher as an army, so when it's revealed at the end of episode 1 that it's simply just one guy, it's extremely terrifying. In fact, the show's cinematography is framed in a way that we never see his face until we get to the point where Matt gets shot in the face. So once it's revealed as to who he is, it doesn't take away from our fear, but rather it sort of enhances it. To know that just one ordinary looking guy can take down our main hero like this adds so much tension to the story, but like I said before, simply being a physical force is not enough. And oh boy, does this show go really deep in the dichotomy between Daredevil and the Punisher. Season 2, Episode 3, New York's Finest. This episode is really just one big heated philosophical debate on whether it's justified in killing people. Both parties really go at it in their points, but ultimately we don't get an answer. Punisher makes really great points in that since he didn't finish Grotto off, other innocent people ended up dying just because Grotto was trying to save his neck. But the show also smartly makes the viewer spend a considerable amount of time with Grotto. We as a viewer can see there's good in him and maybe he does deserve redemption. Daredevil makes a really great point in that we, as humans, do not have the right to make the call on taking that away from someone. Punisher heavily challenged Matt's philosophy here as he completely corners him into a scenario where somebody has to die. There is no outcome here where everyone lives. Either he shoots Punisher to save Grotto, or he himself realizes that he should shoot Grotto. It really makes Matt think that his methods are ineffective and that killing people will actually result in a more morally desirable outcome. Punisher is a great villain because he's not just a villain, he's a guy that genuinely believes that his methods are for the good of humanity, which is probably my favorite trait of an antagonist. Lastly, the monologue in episode 4.
I'll read to you tomorrow night. Never think that for her there was not gonna be any tomorrow, see? The last time I see her, I'd be holding her lifeless body in my arms. Meat was spilling out of her red. The place where her face used to be. Yeah. I think I'm done. Red. I think I'm done.
Yep, I'm totally fine. Yep. The fact that Jon Bernthal didn't win an Emmy for this is just, it's a crime. This scene alone tells us everything we need to know about his character. 1, he's a regular dude. 2, he's emotionally vulnerable. 3, his motivation for doing what he's doing. 4, insight to his past family life. And 5, the parallels between him and Matt. One of the main takeaways from his character is how determined he is. Daredevil's main characteristic is his perseverance, his drive to help people no matter how many times he gets beat up and taken down. The same applies to Punisher. I mean, my man literally gets his foot drilled into and he's still putting 110% into his work. The two have a very similar drive, motivation, and it's spectacularly parallel to their differing philosophies, which makes for some of the most intense, drama-filled conflict I've ever seen. And last but not least, Benjamin Poindexter, aka Bullseye. First, quick disclaimer, I'm not gonna go as deep into this character here because I already did an entire video essay on him, so if you want more of an in-depth dive, just watch that video. But what makes Bullseye a great villain is, well, everything. He's probably the most different from Punisher and Fisk because when he's introduced, he's not a pre-established villain. Also, there's no mystery build-up like the previous two, he's just introduced as some regular dude. But does that make him worse? Absolutely not. I love this approach as we get to see him as this regular guy on the edge of breaking as he ends up giving in to the devil. It's honestly really painful as a viewer to see such a regular dude going down a dark path, and it's written superbly. His origin plays out during the first half of the season and we can see that he's just a guy trying to do the right thing, but life has consistently screwed him over. One of the main themes of Daredevil Season 3 is abandonment and learning to love and forgive one another. Karen is abandoned by her father, Matt is abandoned by everyone in his life for as long as he could remember, although he does have some people who care about him. But rather than embracing them, he chooses to abandon them first. And Bullseye was abandoned by his parents, his mentors, Dr. Mercer, Julie, and his FBI team. The difference here is that Bullseye is not like Matt. He's actually trying to get people in his life that will stick with him rather than trying to abandon him. Alongside this, there's some great visual contrasting details of how Bullseye is a long-range guy, while Matt thrives in close-quarter combat. So Bullseye chooses to deal with his anxiety and all his issues from afar, such as not properly dealing with his stress or stalking Julie from a distance rather than just talking to her, and Matt is someone who dives headfirst into his problems, for better or worse. So we already have this great parallel between the two. Matt is the result of someone who has people who care about him, while Dex is the result of someone who has no one who cares about him. Which raises another interesting question. Should we really be condemning Dex simply because life screwed him over? It's not really his fault that he ended up being such a bad guy. In fact, the only reason he turned evil was because he believed he finally had someone who cared about him. Oh geez, this is really messed up. And Season 3 Episode 6 is where we see the breaking point. This episode does everything it needs to do as it establishes him as a major threat, a terrifying yet sympathetic layered character, and a direct parallel to the protagonist, which makes Bullseye a perfect antagonist. And to add on to this, the season also develops Fisk even more, as Matt goes through a major crisis of whether or not he should kill him. He's gone through this debate a lot, but what strengthens this theme this time is Bullseye, because he's essentially the visual representation of what Matt would look like if he murdered people, and it'd be horrifying. I touched on this a little bit in my WandaVision video essay, but I'll reiterate it real quick. WandaVision's theme is overcoming grief. So what they should have done with Agatha was tie her into the theme somehow, and I recommended that we learn that she lost a loved one close to her, and the reason she's studying Wanda is to learn how to bring her loved one back. But instead we don't get any contrasting motivations or beliefs, it's just completely unrelated motive to garner power from Wanda. Meanwhile, Bullseye contributes completely to the main themes of love and abandonment. It does make me a little sad though we didn't see more of Bullseye, because he was going to be the major player in Season 4, and I would have loved to have explored that character much more as a person there. Fingers crossed. But I hope you guys enjoyed this video essay. I'm not sure if y'all are tired of the Daredevil video essays, so I'll try to just chill out on them for a while. And yeah, if you guys liked the video, make sure to leave a like and comment down your thoughts on how antagonists should be portrayed. And with all that being said, I hope you guys have a great rest of your day. Peace.